Every computer chip that we create for AI requires 8 pure gallons of water per chip. Last year, there was 1.3 trillion chips. Each one, 8 gallons of water. We don't have that kind of water. It's extraordinary. We're going to have to learn to listen to the waters, the floods, the droughts, the heat waves, the wildfires, the hurricanes. What's happening is the water planet is determining the future. What we found was really interesting, that the great paradigm shifts in history are all infrastructure transformation, and most important, new ways to organize water. And the question is, will this planet survive and flourish in new ways?
AI 时代算力增长需要海量的芯片，而芯片制造的背后隐藏着惊人的水资源消耗。全球基础设施正在重建，也正在倒逼人类寻找新的水管理模式。面对这样一切，我们如何适应一个水之星球？如何能够在 AI、科技、经济和生态之间寻找到平衡呢？今天我们非常荣幸地邀请到了里夫金教授，他是全球知名的经济学家，也是《未来水星球》这本书的作者。他将与我们共同探讨人类如何在这样一个水主宰的时代找到新的繁荣之道。
And the reason is our planetary hydrosphere, the waters of this planet, are rewilding in ways that we have never seen before. And the result is it's taking us into the 6th extinction of life on the planet. The last extinction was 65 million years ago. And now our scientists are telling us with global warming that we may see the extinction of half the species living on this earth in the lifetime of today's children. This is an extraordinary moment. We have gone back and we have dug up the burial grounds of the Carboniferous era from 350 million years ago. And we exhumed the dead bodies of plant and animal life that had morphed into coal, oil, and natural gas. We took those dead bodies that are now coal, oil, and gas out of the planet's Earth. And then what we did is we used those energies to propel the entire industrial age, the age of progress, capitalist, socialist economies, etc. And the result is this: in spewing massive volumes of CO2 and methane and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere from these global warming gases, those molecules have now become so thick that when the planet, that it forces the water from the oceans, the lakes, the soil, the trees into the atmosphere more quickly. In the spring, we're getting flooding across every single continent, wiping out ecosystems, destroying the ability to put in our crops, killing our fellow species, undermining the security of our own human race. Then in the summer, we're getting droughts and heat waves. We're getting temperatures of 100, 110, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. People are dying. Then we get the hurricanes and typhoons in the fall. So we're getting massive, uncontrollable water events in the winter, and they're pouring massive snowfalls into regions that have never had snow. We need to establish a whole set of premises and principles for living on a water planet rather than living on a land planet. And that's why I wrote this book, Planet Aqua, Rethinking Our Home in the Universe. This is the time, and we don't have much time left, on how do we begin to think of a blue economy alongside a green economy? And how do we begin to live on a water planet in new ways? Every computer chip that we create for AI requires 8 pure gallons of water per chip. Last year, there was 1.3 trillion chips. Each one, 8 gallons of water. We don't have that kind of water. It's extraordinary. In Chatbox, I think it's for every something like 10 responses that you have to 20 or 30 when you're chatting, which is a few minutes, 1 bottle of water. Let's look back and see how the great paradigm shifts in history occur. If we know how they occur anthropologically, maybe we can get a roadmap of what we need to do here, because it's a crisis. When we look back at history, what we found was really interesting, that the great paradigm shifts in history are all infrastructure transformations. And that is at a moment of time, it's usually serendipitous. New technologies emerge and converge. What are they? Number one, new communication revolutions. Number two, new energy regimes. Number three, new modes of mobility and logistics. Number four, and the most important, new ways to organize water. When these four technology revolutions come together in new ways, they completely change everything. They change our economic systems, the way we govern ourselves, how we approach science and technology, how we educate our kids, how we orient ourselves in time and space. We need a new playbook. We have to rethink every aspect of our relationship to a water planet, not a land planet. That means we have to rethink our relationship to nature. We have to have a completely new approach to science and technology. We need a whole new way to educate our children. We need to begin to develop whole new approaches to economic life and what it's all about. Well, for all of history, up until around the 15th century, the idea that human beings could own the oceans or propertize them and commercialize them and constrain them. Portugal and Spain were the two big water powers back in the late 1400s. They were fighting each other in the ocean, colonize other parts of the world like this. And it was really the Western powers. By the 19th century, everybody was claiming oceans off their coastal regions for fishing. And then in the 20th century, all the minerals and all the oil underneath the ocean floor. All right. So then they started to ask, well, how can we control property beyond the coastline into the ocean? And in the last part of the 20th century, they said, let's have a treaty. The treaty was devastating. The treaty said, okay, we're going to divide up the oceans. And you can have a huge amount of the oceans outside of your coastal region as an exclusive economic zone to exploit the oil under the ground, the water, to exploit the minerals, the metals. They fished out the oceans. They're depleting them. They polluted the oceans. It's a mess. Then you have all the plastics in the oceans. It's just terrible. So finally, it became too much. We realized we were losing the water planet, the oceans. And the United Nations and countries around the world said, we can't do this anymore. Water is not a resource. It's a life source. It doesn't belong to anyone specifically. It belongs to all the creatures on this earth, on this planet, water planet. We are moving from geopolitics to biosphere politics. Geopolitics is the politics of a fossil fuel, age of progress civilization. Biosphere politics is the politics of a living on a water planet, where it's a life source, not a resource. All right. So given that as the framework, we have to extend the notion of governance. We're not going to give up nation states, but we're going to have to extend governance to bioregions, ecoregions. And the reason is this: climate disasters do not honor political boundaries. When you have a flood, a drought, a heat wave, a wildfire, it crosses all the political boundaries, and it affects the specific ecosystem that you're living in. All right. So increasingly, we are now moving toward the notion of extending governance. We don't give up sovereign nation states, but across political boundaries, because you have to prepare, rescue, restore, and be resilient. And that means that if your political boundaries are connected to a common ecosystem,